everyone is not your audience.
True.
Who is your audience?
Well, I think it depends on who you're trying to reach and really understanding who they are, their nuances, your problems, the problems you're trying to solve for them, um, demographics, but really understanding, how can you help them solve their problems?
I just think that it used to be so much easier because like you had one channel or maybe 3 channels and you could reach them and there wasn't as much noise.
Well, I think before, if you could categorize it, B2B.
Oh, B2B, business to business.
Yeah, or B2C. And I think that's really changed a lot.
We were just talking about that this morning in a client meeting that, one of our clients they're multifaceted, very large organization that is trying to figure out how to really take it apart and put it back together so they maximize the value. And they realize over time they've grown so much that they have all these pieces and parts that don't really connect. There's no sense to how they all connect.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really resonated with me this morning was that I think that the leader probably has more equity than some of the products. And they don't even think of the leader as part of their brand architecture.
Well, and thinking about that, I think what their concern was that they feel like they have a lot of different types of audiences, a lot of different stakeholders, and maybe concerned to put it all in one bucket.
Well, they have to choose. And I think that gets hard, especially today because of all the noise. It's harder to gain someone's attention, that sometimes you can't cater to every single audience because it really, to me, it diminishes your message. And it's confusing because you have to be targeting them in their tool or their whatever vehicle they see you.
Yeah.
Makes it confusing.
It does. And I think I can see your point about being really confusing, but I think that because we're talking about this morning, but our meeting this morning, because there are a lot of different types of audience, it's maybe picking the audience that you really want to connect with. And that doesn't mean that's not who you work with in other ways, but really trying to find out who is that ideal audience.
Ideal audience, who their ideal audience is. And maybe breaking it down into primary audience, secondary audience, and maybe even the third level of audiences. I find that now, because we have so many brands of leaders out there that are communicating and representing their organization, that the audience, even persona, has become more personal, more person to person, less, organization or company speaking to people, and more a person speaking to a person. So it's more one-on-one, like first person.
Well, I think now it's a little challenging to know what's real, and I can see with a leader, that's there's the emotion, there's the trust, there's the relationship, whereas sometimes with a brand, it's a little harder to do.
Well, we have, as you know, all the digital twin work we're doing. Many leaders that come to us and say, well, I want a digital avatar, I want a clone. And I've seen a big pushback on clones within companies because people don't trust them. I think we're at a place in digital twins where these digital assets they're pretty close. I mean, think about where they were even 6 months ago, where you're that's a clone, that's a digital avatar. I think also the nomenclature of what people call them is kind of confusing. But the idea that these digital people that represent people, people don't trust them yet. So you have to be really careful about what you use it for, because trust is a thing that holds companies together. And I feel like that these clones, if not done really well with very direct, clear intent, they don't sit right.
Well, and I think a lot of times they sound too perfect.
Yeah, that too.
Hard to relate to. Yeah, seen that too.
Yeah. Can't wait. This is going to be interesting. Interesting ride in terms of digital twins and clones and avatars. I think that we've all probably experienced speaking of audiences, some audiences don't want to talk to a person, so they go to a chat bot or, go to a online, place where you can ask questions and get answers, and people accept that. They want that. They don't really want that human interaction. And I think digital assets like that are perfect for those situations, for those audiences. But for people that you really want to build trust with and build a relationship with, I think you have to use the real you right now. And let's just see how that goes over the next maybe 6 months or a year to really think about how that should evolve as a key digital asset for some of these companies.
Yeah, and how do you keep it authentic too?
Well, I think, I know we've talked a lot about digital twins, and the ones that we've worked with, I think it all depends on the content. You have to, you build these digital assets, and you have to train them and nurture them and test them, and like, wait a minute, I wouldn't say that, or that's not really me, or that sounds like it's from an LLM, and to really get it to a point where you feel like it can learn and grow with you. And a lot of people just create these assets, put them out there, and don't even think, well, that's what these, let's just say, clones look like 6 months ago, but they're going to look very different very soon.
I think so.
I really do. I think they're getting better and better. And I mean, from our own experience as being identical twins, there are often times when people can't tell us apart, and I can see them looking at us and looking at every aspect of like, wait, which one is this? And they know that it's they know us, and they know that it's one of us, obviously, but they're waiting to kind of assess their visual, database to understand which one it is.
Well, a cue. Like I notice that sometimes with me, people will come up and say, hey, and of course I just come, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
And maybe, because I don't want to have that moment of like people not recognizing who I am. And so I just kind of go with it for a minute.
I'm a hugger. They're like, what's wrong with Winnie?
But I think the same thing is true with what you're saying happening with these digital twins too.
Yeah, I think it's a really exciting time. Going back to the beginning of the conversation about audiences, that what will our audiences look like in the future? Because not only is everyone is not your audience, but think about potential digital audiences. So, I know that some of our dear friends have been working with agents that are communicating with agents, where the human is not in the loop. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but the interesting thing is we may have an audience in the future that isn't a person. Not sure how we're going to manage that from a brand architecture perspective, but it's certainly not going to be boring.
Well, I think it takes out the human element.
Yeah. But I think sometimes going back to just send me to a bot.
Yeah.
I want to know where my Amazon order is. I don't want to talk to a person, So maybe that's going to be okay for certain instances. I think one way that I've seen it work really effectively is where you have essentially a digital mind versus a digital twin, and all of the information in that mind is of a person's identity, their intellect, and so that they feed that digital asset that information. And over time, it becomes somewhat of a representation of how someone thinks, sort of like a thought partner, thinking partner. And I've seen some that are pretty effective. The challenge is people make them, they put them on the shelf, and they sit in that isolated, independent space, but they don't have that interaction, so they don't grow and evolve. We were watching it's one of the AI classes that our team is taking, and they were talking about this idea of intelligence and how these systems will eventually, we try to keep them in our LLMs and try to create our, own agents and our own Claude code. And, but the real gift is like putting them out there, putting them in open source and letting them become. But the challenge with me is if it represents you as a identity, then do we let who owns the visual representation of us?
I don't know. That's yet to be seen.
And so with the audience, what does that become? I know that you may have seen that New York Times article about people that had sold their identity for these infomercials and didn't realize what they were actually selling. And now they're selling things that those individuals wouldn't like sell in terms of like their own personal integrity, and they're really struggling with it.
I didn't see that. Interesting. I think it goes back to something really simple. It's really understanding, who you're trying to reach on a personal level. Like you always say, P2P, and
person to person.
Yeah, and to be able to, I remember we were meeting last week with our client about trying to decide which audience is theirs, and the way we've really found out who their audience is we went and we talked to their customers.
Which client was that? Can you tell me that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We usually don't disclose the names of our clients, but that's how we really understood who the client was.
Yeah, by interviewing people were those clients, were those peers, who were those that you interviewed?
Those are clients. But I think there was a basic idea of who the client, who the audience is, because obviously client is your audience as well. But to really understand them from the outside, because a lot of times when you're working with an audience or with clients, it's not clear. But by looking at it from the outside was really helpful for him to understand that.
Yeah, because he can't see himself. He doesn't know how he's perceived.
Yeah.
I think that's, by the way, it was a him. I think that's typically true with, especially on the leader side, that they don't have that external perception of how they're seen. I think it's easy for companies to define that because they have those multi-dimensional ways to do that. But when it comes to a leader, I think, double down on that. Really think about, well, how am I perceived? Because how I think I'm perceived might not be the actual way I'm perceived, or maybe not how I want to be perceived. And really asking people that know you to help you see you.
To get an understanding on an external perception, rather than an internal perception. Yeah,
that's point. Becoming so important.
And
then what is the bridge between that, the brand of that leader and the brand of the company? How do those things connect? I really believe that we're moving into a space and an era where people buy from people trust people. And how do we really think about how we can leverage that in the companies that we own and run and buy from? I think that we have a real opportunity to really bring those minds, those leaders that have incredible brands and are authentic, just like the meeting we had this morning, that who really just don't realize they're as talented as they really are, because they're just real people. And to kind of move beyond the very formatted, overly, produced content, and just talk and speak,
have a conversation,
and tell people what you stand for, what matters to you, and the difference you make in the world. And those trusting moments can have a huge impact on the brand of a company.
But I think there also needs to be an alignment there.
Exactly.
So, if the leader stands for something or has a certain values or vision of the organization, it needs to align with the culture inside the organization too. And that can be challenging too. And it's really, they may not have the exact same, what they stand for, what their values are, but how do their own personal values,
I hope they would have the same values if they are leading the company.
Yeah. Well, of course, you would hope that from a cultural standpoint.
But actually, I didn't think about it that way until you just said it, that maybe a company's values need to be revisited to align with the leader of that company's values. And I know this is something that sounds, well, of course they do, but maybe it's a good time to really think about that, because we've seen time and time, and I know we've worked with many thought leaders that have sort of fallen off a bit in terms of things that they've done, things that they've said, or maybe even past digital assets that are out there that misrepresent them today, that didn't align with the company. It caused some issues.
Well, I think it's always a good idea to kind of revisit those things on a regular basis, because you've got new hires, and you want to constantly engage in terms of communicating what it is and talk about how that not only relates inside the company, but also outside the company too.
Oh, internally. Definitely internally.
Yeah. But externally too. I think it's really important. And I think it's important for your audience to understand that too.
Well, the internal audience or the external audience?
Both.
With what we've even done in our own company, and the the new people that we've hired, and they're really looking at like how AI not necessarily enabled people are, but do they have the mindset to really think about how they might build and grow as a leader using AI. I think that that's something to really think about also in the future. That how do we build those kinds of things into our core values and what we stand for, and then what happens when those people maybe move to another company or work with another brand. Maybe there's more of an open platform in the future so that people have that historical footprint, because now everything's visible.
But you have that historical footprint now, like with for example, Claude Teams.
Yeah.
You can now work in your organization to be able to share data.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really a positive move. And so that everyone is, kind of working within the same project.
Same space. Back to the audience topic and how someone would start really thinking about who their audience is and how they would use that information to build, let's say, an editorial calendar to reach that audience. What would they do to start?
To be able, well, first of all, I like the idea of having content pillars. So, based on my audience, what are the 4 to 5 content pillars that I want to make sure that I communicate over and over again, because I know that that's what my audience is looking for, and developing it based on that. Interviewing with people within the company, interviewing clients, and really understanding, how to best communicate that.
Yeah, so content pillars, let's say you get an editorial calendar out. I actually like analog editorial calendars.
Yeah, I do too. I do too.
We have those big ones where you print it out. We could do color sticky notes. You do the content pillars, each a color sticky note, and you actually, create content based on those. And let's say I'm gonna do content 1, I'm gonna share on Mondays, and content 3, I'm gonna share on Thursdays, and everything in between. Here's the different channels I'm gonna use. So you can see it mapped out. Is so helpful. And then like where you can kind of imagine that journey that you take an audience on throughout a single month. We used to do, 90-day in advance editorial calendars, but we're down to 30 now because we're really trying to target timely events and timely content more than we have in the past.
Sometimes it's the same day, depending on if like something happens, if there's something that's really important that needs to be communicated. I do think it's really great to have kind of a content map, but also to be flexible enough to where you can interject additional things as you need to.
I'm excited. I'm excited about the idea that it's time to really sit down and look at who your true audience is, to really think and realize that everyone is not your audience. And if that's the case, maybe I don't reach everyone that I really reached in the past, but I'm reaching the right people in the future.
Well, like I said before, it's about who you're trying to seek, not what you're trying to take in. Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
And I think, I know we talked a little bit about the AI tools. I think AI, that's what it is. To me, AI is a tool, just like the internet's a tool. There's tons of tools out there, but it's about making sure that is, whatever you use to build your content, that you make sure that it's authentic, in your voice. And really solving those problems.
Yeah, and think about doing it in person too. A lot of people think about editorial calendars, they think about like digital platforms and all the tools, but I think you cannot replace being in person with someone. What you can do is to really think about what do you want to communicate when you're in person with someone, and to be more thoughtful about it, just because people are simply distracted.
Yeah, and that's why you see so much video now. Yeah.
For now, who knows what's next? Algorithm. LinkedIn just updated their algorithm.
I saw that.
Yeah. Well, this has been fantastic. Overall message: everyone is not your audience. So let's see what everyone comes up with.
See you next time.
See you.